All right, third time's the charm. I am actually successfully, it looks like, going to post twice a week. That's cool. Today, we're doing The Great Work by Guy Haley, and it's basically a Belisarius Cawl novel. So, genuinely, a book's title has rarely been so literal as, Belisarius Cawl, The Great Work. It's a story that kind of drives itself forwards due to like the indomitability and genius of Belisarius Cawl. Like within the setting itself, he's an ancient figure and one of importance within the setting of 40k, and he rivals Primarchs absolutely, and also Abaddon the Spoiler in how much he has changed the actual setting. He's over 10,000 years old, and he's witnessed the breadth of the Horus Heresy, and also like been here the entire time, witnessing the decline of the Adeptus Mechanicus. And since he was alive for the days of the Mechanicum, Belisarius has outright like heretical views at this point, just like Gilliman believing in the imperial truth and not really in the, cult of the savior emperor. Belisarius is kind of on the outs with his own organization / also the prime conduit, because those that do believe him or in him, they also really, really like him. So, choose what you want to believe with Belisarius. Either he's going to save us all, or he's gonna mess up somehow and wet the bed. But moving on from his heretical views, they clash with the Adeptus Mechanicus of the contemporary Imperium. For starters, he does believe in like the scientific method, and he won't even deny when he's being accused of being a scientist. How dare he, right? So if you want to get into like the actual weeds on why he prioritizes like innovation and research, then that's a much longer story. I feel like that's basically just who he is as a person, like over some other reason. I think it's just way more nebulous. The Adeptus Mechanicus, they believe that all information has already been like made, right? Like they've already discovered, ancient humanity has already done the legwork, and it's up to the Adeptus Mechanicus to go on holy missions of discovery to find this lost technology and information, which usually comes in the form of STCs. And STC is like stand-in for both a standard template constructor, the actual mechanism, and also a standard template construct. So yeah, don't get that confused, even though it's confusing. It is a complicated belief, like the way that it has formed and why it's become so dogmatic within the Adeptus Mechanicus, that is a bit complicated. And it goes a bit with the deeper history of humanity and the knowledge that the Adeptus Mechanicus has kind of uprooted as it's had this mission to secure more and more knowledge. Like the more they learn, the more they're like, yeah, we definitely shouldn't innovate anymore. It is complicated, but it's kind of outside the scope of this video. But yeah, we'll continue onwards. The important part is that Belisarius goes against the grain with the organization itself, and there's more than a small fraction of the Adeptus Mechanicus that would gladly see him dead, and there's also a bigger portion that just want to bring him to Mars for questioning. In this book, as well as in like Genefather, the Silent King novel that just came out for the Dawn of Fire series, and the Dark Imperium trilogy, the topic of Belisarius Cawl taking the highest office in the Adeptus Mechanicus, that of the Fabricator General, has come up. His controversial standing within his own organization means that if he did ever actually take that title, it would immediately create a schism within the Adeptus Mechanicus. But it's not like he's actually considering doing this. If you ask the author, Guy Haley, he would say that Belisarius Cawl just straight up doesn't want it, because that's just not who he is. He's a maverick, and he doesn't like being told what to do or telling other people what to do. He likes to do his own thing, focus on himself, blah, blah, blah. And then if you ask me, I would say that he just doesn't need that like political weight. He doesn't need the bureaucracy. He likes doing his own thing. And like, it would also be very difficult to explain all the stuff that he does get up to, because he's out there vivisecting Necrons, toying around with Primaris Marines, and like outright basically making, Primus, who we'll get into it later, but I'm pretty sure Primus has more than one gene seed inside of him, to the point where I think it's 20. But again, we'll get into that. This leads kind of nicely into why this book is actually called The Great Work. So Belisarius has like a few things that he refers to as his great works. Making the Primaris is one of them. Sealing the Great Rift is another. Like cutting the warp off completely from real space is another. And then awakening the Emperor is another one. I don't know all of them off the top of my head. I believe there's 5 that he refers to as his great works, but yeah, if you want to look into that, feel free. Yeah, so like I said, Belisarius was tasked with a few things by Guilliman back in the days of the heresy. One of them was to use the saying Primus Portum, which, I'm sorry, I will tangent off again. The saying Primus Portum, that isn't what this repository of information is called. It's... I actually completely forgot what it is called. This thing is named after where it was found. So there was this port of Cawl, and it's actually just all in a novel. It's actually in a novella for the Siege of Terra series, so if you want to know more, I'd probably just look into that because it is genuinely good. But the important thing to take away from what the saying Primus Portum is that it's a repository of information that contains all of the genetic like blueprints, and basically it's just like an informational of how to make more Space Marines. So it's incredibly important. So all Guilliman asked Belisarius to do was to bolster the Space Marine ranks. So he actually went above and beyond by not only making like more Space Marines, but he also made improvements on the design by making the Primaris like Marines. So making them taller and stabilizing the gene seed, and also making like all the weapons and armor that come along with it. That was like way above and beyond his pay grade and what he was asked to do. But these as the Space Marines, they aren't new like to the setting. I mean, they are technically, because it's been going for like almost 40 years and they've only been around for like 10. But like, at this point, it's been a decade. Like, we've seen these before, but just in case you don't know where they came from, now you know. They came from Belisarius. He's importante. Anyways, so a squad of Primaris Space Marines are present in this novel as a full squad, as well as a full squad of the last remaining scythes of the Emperor, which we'll get to, but I want to finish talking about why Belisarius is busying himself on Sotha. It makes the book just make a lot more sense when you start listening to it, to basically narrowly focus on what Belisarius is doing and why he's there. And like, because how this book is written does get a bit of flack, and yeah, it's just not written very linearly. But anyways, so Belisarius, he's finished with his work on the Primaris Space Marines, and now he turns his attention to another of his great works, which is closing the warp out of real space. From his researches and communication with Necron constructs, he knows that Blackstone is the key to achieving this objective. So Belisarius has come to Sotha, the old homeworld of the Scythes of the Emperor, which have fallen to a Genestealer cult, and Sotha serves as the setting of like the book. We'll just be there forever. Belisarius is here for the Pharos Beacon. It's a device with like a lot of history, and it's a function that I am more than positive like several other lore tubers who are not me, because I don't even think I am a lore tuber, have already covered. So if you want to know, I would go look at their videos, because I'm positive they're going to be better with the whole information and all that jazz. It does have a very rich history that involves Alexis Pollux and Barbara Stantioch, and as from what I can tell about like people, because like I don't dip my toes in 30K very often. It's just the Horus Heresy it's good. There are certainly amazing books in the Horus Heresy, but I also just I like 40K. It's my bread and butter. I love it so much more. And but yeah, from what I know about 30K, like fans, Alexis Pollux and Barbara Stantiak are like rivaling Rylanor in their popularity. And they definitely have a better bromance than Ferris and Fulgrim ever did. So there's that. And side note, if you do go into this book like not knowing the history of the Pharos Beacon, then this book will give you like zero help, because much of the history that survives into the modern setting about anything that has to do about the happenings like during the Crusade, at least when it comes to Sotha, is just like wildly wrong. So yeah, to cut straight to the point, Belisarius is at Sotha in order to turn on the Pharos Beacon, to get to its heart and find a real-time current map that shows every Necron world or installation or celestial body that has Necron stuff on it, or even a pylon world, just anything. He wants a map that has basically all of that going on. And it is a goal that he, by the end of the book, does succeed in getting. So since it's a Belisarius Cawl novel, there's a lot of shenanigans that happen. There's a whole Necron labyrinth. There's gene stealers. There's canoptic constructs, etc. So things are far from dry for all that kind of accompany the prime conduit of the Omnissiah into this mountain, the beacon. So that's the story in a nutshell. And if it sounds good, that's because it actually really is. And this is like the full, so this is the review. For a moment, the best part of this book is how easily the dialogue comes from all the characters in the book. So from the least important characters all the way up to the Emperor of Mankind, who does actually have a presence in this book, which is cool. And he actually does talk, which is also rare and very cool. The dialogue is smooth, which is always a bonus when an author makes it clear that they have actually indeed had a conversation with other living people. So like when they, because we've all read those books where like the dialogue is just so stilted and like robotic, you have to question like, man, whoever wrote this, what are your conversations on a daily actually like? Because whoa, like these are rough. Another thing that this book does well is develop and keep the atmosphere of exploration into like a dangerous place. And Sotha, at least as far as the Pharos Beacon is concerned, it was already a dark and mysterious place before it was fully occupied. Like, or not before it was fully, when it was fully occupied. And now that it's not occupied and not hustling, bustling with like people, it's even more dark and more confusing and more dangerous, because now it's hiding like gene stealers, and the Necron technology is like actually awakening. So there's canoptic scarab constructs just all over the place. So yeah, do you establish a genuine connection to the red shirt Space Marines? Not really, but on a bright side, they aren't like suddenly made out of cotton because Guy Haley can't be bothered remembering. Even though they aren't like wildly important to the plot, they are still like actually Space Marines. It's genuinely like a personal pet peeve of mine that characters without plot armor become incredibly fragile, like to the point where you as the reader are like, man, it's a miracle that you actually made it through your training, like without even considering the fact that you're here now in this moment. Like the fact that you made it this whole time without just like randomly dying or like combusting into flames is just like, how? Because you've been acting stupid this entire time. But yeah, so a lot of the characters in this novel are actually like good at their actual jobs and like competent regardless of how much they play a role in like the plot itself, which is really nice, because seeing like a Space Marine do the equivalent thing of like stubbing their toe and then dying because like the stakes have to be established or something, a writer would say. Like it's just nice to see that they don't do that. The glaring issue that most people have with this novel, so yeah, that was all the good things, and now we're getting into the bad things. The glaring issue that most people have with this novel is that it isn't told in like a linear way, and it's told in about as far away from a linear way as you can possibly get. It's due to the fact that a Catan is peering into all the pasts of the characters. So a Catan is a star god. I won't get into that. Just suffice to say, it's a very powerful entity. Hopefully the Nightbringer will be something that's brought up here in the next few years, but we will see. Fingers are crossed. Anyways, a Catan is waking up. A lot of the technology that would keep a Catan like subdued, because they're basically batteries at this point, because Necrons are just that cool. They have gods as batteries. But practically, as the reader, you're basically being constantly tossed from one character's past back into the present, back into another, like a different character's past, back into the present, and then like back into another character's past, and then back into somebody else's past. Like it's a lot. So it's jarring. And a lot, if you go into the comments on Audible, it is definitely that. People are just like, oh my God. But it is a pretty unique way to mess with the whole like time concept thing. And you can easily like mess up doing the time thing. Like we've all seen a Marvel movie in the last 8 years. Okay. Like time is very tricky, and it can very easily lead into the setting just having absolutely zero stakes. So it's actually pretty cool to see the gimmick that is time being manipulated by this incredibly powerful entity. But overall, if I were to put my flag anywhere, I would say it's good. And it's firmly in like the 40K homework category if you're one of those people looking to get caught up on like the main narrative. But just because it's homework doesn't mean it's a bad read or boring. It's actually really fun. So I do say check it out. But that's pretty much that's it for the story breakdown and review. The rest of this is going to be like really juicy lore that was built into kind of the fabric of this book. So if you want to click off, go for it. The next video that I'm going to do is probably going to be Hammer and Bolter, not to be confused with the Hammer and Bolter like animated series on Warhammer Plus, the book Hammer and Bolter, or it's going to be Mad Doc Grotznick, or it's going to be the Carcharodon's like Void Exile book. But anyways, if you are hopping off, thanks for watching. Appreciate you. But for those that are staying, we're diving straight into the lore. So Primus is most certainly made up of all 20 of the legions, like Gene Seed, which is, I know, a spicy take, but I have proof, I swear. There's a scene in the book where Belisarius and company enter the Pharos proper, and they get like a glimpse at different realities. Long story, read it if you want to know why. These different realities all have minor things different about them, like a space marine wearing slightly different armor than their counterpart, or like an augmetic limb here, or an augmetic limb there, or like they're wearing like a different tabard, etc., etc. So in Primus's case, though, like it's off the wall. He's wearing gray armor, right? And all the different primii, that they see is like they're all wearing the same armor, is my point. They're all gray. So there's not confusing like, oh, but that's a different Primus. Oh, but that's a different, like they are different Primuses. I'm confusing you and me at the same time. Anyways, there are 20 gray clad space marines in place of our one singular Primus. And 20 is a very special number because there's 20 founding legions. So you can absolutely say that, actually, since it's a parallel universe we're seeing, then the 2nd and the 11th legions didn't fall, blah, 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 blah. But I think that's a buzzkill take. So, because we know that their Primus is definitely a like hybrid mix of all 18 gene seeds, because Belisarius is himself, and he was trying to challenge himself, and also he's the first Primaris Space Marine, so he's like testing the waters and all that jazz. So all I'm saying is that if anyone's going to be messing around with the Lost Legion's gene seed, then it is going to be Belisarius. Like, he has the tools, he had 10,000 years, and he has the arrogance. So, and we have the proof, because seeing 20 of them, that's a pretty big head nod. That, and also it would explain why Fabius was like foaming at the mouth when he got a better look at the gene sequence of Primus after raiding the Tsar Quasitar in Gene Father. So, also, long story, read the book. It's also really good. But anyway, moving on. So the next thing is Belisarius himself. So he has multiple souls, but importantly, he shares space. The first like soul transfer was kind of the most important. The rest were like pretty supplementary. The significant one is Ezekiel Sedaine. They share space as far as souls go. So a significant part of the novel is dedicated to Belisarius's origin story. He's born on Mars, and he's already able to talk like straight out of the tank. Which, yeah, have you met the man? He's gonna know how to talk immediately upon being born. He's a borderline heretic, even when the Cult of Mars was a tad less dogmatic about its views. His best friend and confidant is Friedrich Quo. We get to see their relationship grow and change and all that jazz, which should sound familiar since it's the servitor, if you want to call it a servitor / clone / robotic entity. We don't know, that accompanies Cawl like in the novel. And then his origin story kind of wraps up with Sedaine shooting Quo in an attempt to encourage Cawl to consent to a soul transfer so Sedaine doesn't die, because the rejuvenats that Sedaine is using don't work anymore, and he's like over 300 years old, and he's looking for alternatives, and the alternative he like settles on is a soul transfer. He wants a new body. The important thing to know about Sedaine is that he made the Black Carapace, so he's the reason that the Astartes are able to treat the power armor like it's a second skin, and not like Thunder Warriors, basically, who wore armor on the outside, or like Sisters of Battle, or the Knoll Sisters, or any Inquisitor that puts on power armor. Basically, anybody that doesn't have the Black Carapace isn't moving as fluidly or as well inside of that power armor. They need like a significant power source to move that thing around, and even then it's basically like walking around in like a refrigerator, versus having the refrigerator anticipate your movements and move around with you while you're moving around in the refrigerator. But yeah, anyways, those two are doing the thing inside of Call's own body, because Cawl like was too, like, his ego essentially was too big, that when like Sedaine entered his body, the dominant personality kind of takes the reins, and Sedaine thought that he had a more dominant personality than Cawl, which that is a bold claim. And he had the chance to like talk to this man, and then he's like, I have a bigger personality than you do. And I'm like, no, you don't. Have you talked to him? You have talked to him. So what? But anyways, moving on. The conversation between the Catan and Belisarius. Personally, it's one of my favorite parts of the book, and also it almost doesn't even matter, because nothing this Catan says you can actually verify anywhere else. But it is just so out there in the information category, and it's referencing such old stuff that you're like, wow, that's cool. But yeah, again, take this with a grain of salt, because he's Star God, and we can't really go anywhere else to verify these talking claims. And it doesn't help that some of what he says is like actually true. We know it to be true. So then it's like, okay, well then did he just tell the truth about all this? Is this just free information? But it all just also just seems way too juicy for it to be like straight up free. But anyways, he calls the four gods of chaos manifestations, which we know they aren't actually gods, so that's nothing new. He laughs at, I guess, it. I don't think the Catan is a he. Anyway, the Catan laughs at Belisarius when he talks about the machine god. Like, Belisarius is like, I've met the machine god, blah, blah, blah. And then the Catan is like, no, you haven't, because if you did, I don't think you'd be around. And then he just starts laughing. Yeah. He calls the Emperor of Mankind a weapon. And he also is like, when Belisarius is like, mankind, men, blah, 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 the Catan is just straight up like, wait, men? What? And he does, when he's doing the whole, there's a lot of vivisection in this part, but the Catan actually vivisects Belisarius and finds out that we are created from the old ones. And by we, I mean humanity. And I've said this on the channel before, but I'm still going to say it again because that's a really fun fact. When he talks about the Emperor of Mankind, he also calls him a weapon instead of like an actual god. He's like, he's not a god, he's a weapon. So that's cool to kind of, I don't know what that implies, but another thing the Catan says, and it's something that's like a bit odd, and I also forgot, that the humanity isn't functioning as the old ones like intended us to function. So something about what we're doing is just not the way that we didn't come out of the box doing the correct thing. So definitely some interesting stuff, but it also goes like way beyond the scope of anything we can actually confirm. And it's not something that I feel like an author is ever going to be like, yeah, those questions are solid. Let's give you a biography of why that's correct. Yeah, so take away what you want from that whole experience. The last thing I suppose I'll touch on is the scythes of the Emperor. I know some people have a soft spot for them, and I know in like Astartes Part 2, which I'm dying to see, the scythes actually do have a bit of a thing. They're killing Tyranids as they should be, and they also have a really cool shoulder pauldron like design. Like they have the crossed scythes. Their emblem is pretty sweet. Anyway, so the scythes were established on Sotha to caretake the Pharos beacon. It was not widely known thing since it was only the chapter master that actually knew it. And seemingly somewhere down the line, the chapter master itself, like himself, didn't actually pass down that information. I don't know if it was just because he was like, the best kept secret is if I die with that information, then no one has to keep the secret. Or if it's as simple as like he died in battle and just like didn't have the time to transfer the secret. But, you know, it's forgotten, blah, blah, blah. Which is all well and good, since it wasn't actually the Necrons that would bring the chapter down. That honor is to go to the Tyranids, or more specifically, a gene stealer cult. It insidiously infected the people of Sotha, first to the point where it got into the chapter like navy element, which means that like the admiralty and the fleet itself was compromised. And once reaching such a critical level of control, the cult was even able to taint the gene seed stores of the Space Marines themselves. So as superhuman as the Space Marines are, there's only so strong you can be when your own blood like turns against you. The planet of Sotha does end up falling to the gene stealers, and then it is later consumed by the Tyranids. A few of the actual chapter itself did get off, which was not a coincidence. Is a big old conspiracy. But once the disgusting truth of the matter came to full light, the remaining firstborn Marines have come back to Sotha in order to kill the Patriarch and regain a small amount of their lost honor. It is some compelling stuff, but it does actually kind of get in the way of the more interesting galaxy-defining narrative stuff that's happening with Belisarius and Primus, like literally right next door. So I do get it. If some of you reading this, or if you have read this, I understand the feeling of like Thracian and his vendetta coming off as just kind of, what are we doing? Because it goes from like, hey, we can close the rift, and oh, Primus, you might be made of 20 gene seeds, and then it goes to Thracian, who's just like being sad because his world fell, and you're just like, okay, can we move on? But yeah, anyway, hopefully this wasn't too long of an actual video for you guys. I'm leaning towards putting, I've said this before, but I'm saying it again, Hammer and Bolter is probably going to be my next like actual review, but it might also be the new Carcharodon's book or the Mad Doc Rotsnick book, because I have a couple of credits, and those two books sound really cool. Anyways, we'll see though. Not sure. We'll see. I guess you'll know on Saturday when I know. But either way, thanks for listening. I will see you guys later. Yeah, see you around.